Welcome to the Will and Dave Show, where we talk about hard things, whether it's comfortable or not. We think those conversations are necessary and important. We think that having different opinions is crucial to a healthy discourse. So saddle up, enjoy the fireside chat.
Hey, William.
Hello.
I need to get rid of that lower third because that is still May 815. Go away.
It's been a busy week for both of us.
It's been a hectic evening.
I like tonight's been hectic, yeah, but I've had like a bonkers last week or two. So we're both coming in hot to this episode.
I want to ask you though, because I just learned something. This is completely off topic and
Hmm.
and not prepared at all.
Okay.
So I heard that you are in a production, which I knew
Yeah.
you were in a production, except I didn't know what the production was of, and you're doing a
Mhm.
whole bunch of Carol Burnett skits.
Yeah. Yeah. Very carefully picked so as to be kosher in 2022. But yes,
Okay, so you have to give us a couple lines. You just have to. You've been practicing. You had rehearsal this evening.
I mean, there aren't a lot of like funny lines. It's funny situations, so it's hard
Like
for me to just like deliver a line that's funny.
like what kind of situations? I want to hear about the show. I had no
Uh,
idea you're doing Carol
well,
Burnett, and we
one
kind
of
of like
the
Carol
one of the
Burnett.
running gags is one of Carol Burnett's recurring characters, which is Alice Portnoy, the Girl Scout
Yeah, yeah.
girl who collects money, and so she's in a couple of skits. Most often to my character's chagrin. So I don't play like a singular character. None of us really do.
Right.
It's
Because it
we
is a
we
small town production, so multiple roles, multiple things,
e-
and
well also like in the Carol Burnett show, each actor that was on the
yes,
show played multiple roles, and so each one of us, for the most part, kind of has an actor that we fill the place of
right.
to a degree, and so I fill the place of one of the ones that is on the receiving end of Alice Portnoy's shenanigans,
So
whether that be a gentleman with a hangover who was at a party that he shouldn't have been, or a
okay, let me
gentleman
hear a
who's
line
trying.
from that one. I got to hear at least one line from something.
I mean, the lines aren't exciting.
I want a hangover line.
Mostly, it's she rattles her little change can in his
Yes.
face all the time, and I repeatedly grab the can and be like, "You said you'd stop shaking the can." And it's the line in itself alone
Yes.
is not
Yes.
particularly
No,
funny.
but
I think like one of our favorite lines, because we changed a few of them because some of the references were not
right,
they
you
wouldn't
won't
make
get them.
sense to most people.
Right. Right.
So like in one, my character gets slapped by his wife, and my character in the original script, he's like, "Geez, I should never have taken you to see Patton." For anyone who gets the Patton slap,
Yeah.
we obviously changed it to be more topical. So now it's, "Ah, geez, I should never have taken you to see the Oscars." So we've made some
That's
changes like
good.
that are really
That's
enjoyable,
good.
or like some of the more racially racially questionable jokes, we change them to be about, say, vegans instead.
Gotcha. So what? I just think that's awesome because I'm a
It's fun.
fan
It's a
of
fun
Tim
show.
Conway, who
The
was
Dick
a
Van Dyke
regular.
Show.
No, he was a regular on the Carol Burnett
Mhm.
show.
He was for a little bit. 11 episodes, 10 episodes.
No, no, no. He was a regular. He was more than that.
Dick Van Dyke, Tim
No,
Conway.
Tim Conway.
Yeah, Conway, I don't know. I was just reading about Dick Van
Oh,
Dyke because my point
no.
of
Tim
reference when people
Conway
were
was a
talking about it
regular
was,
on the Carol Burnett show.
oh, okay.
Yeah, he was there all the time. So that was. I just learned that about you, and I just had to
Yeah,
ask you about it because
we've been
it's
working
what I
busy.
do.
It's 9 weeks from first rehearsal to move in, so, so
I need
it's
to
a
move
lot of
rehearsal.
lines to be remembered very quickly.
Yeah, that's why I have a teleprompter somewhere. No teleprompter, just
Not
memory.
on our budget. We there's like one or two scenes where we could cheat, like where our character has a newspaper and we could
Right,
put their
right.
lines on it, but we don't want to do that. It kills the flow of a moment when someone's reading. You can tell.
Oh, come on.
No,
You mean you don't want to be a Joe Biden or a Trump and read from a
no, no,
teleprompter?
no. I want to do it all natural,
Oh,
baby.
natural. So
Even if I
before
flub my lines.
so before we get heavily into this, we should shill. Shill. Is that the word we want? Shill?
Yep, yep. Beg for money.
If you want to support the show, you can do so at the Will and Dave show or at buymeacoffee.com/the Will and Dave show. And no,
There you go.
slash
Will and
Will
Dave
and
show.
Dave
No
show because
we couldn't afford the.
we couldn't afford the. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
You can support the show for the price of a coffee. Send the money our way. We'd thank you for it. And I will do
But all
one.
we can offer at this point.
I will do one. You can do one.
Yeah.
I'm going to do Measure Twice, Cut Once.
There you go.
Is an amazing podcast by the one and only Susan Smith, also known as Stitched by Susan, and she's killing it over there. And if you just want some just easy listening, you can catch her on YouTube as well. And she does these long form videos, usually over 2 hours, and she quilts a whole project. And
Mhm.
so I produce them because I may or may not be related to married to Stitched by Susan because she's really cool.
Fun
But
fact, actually, about her livelihood. I was showing some people that I knew. I was showing them some pictures of her quilts on Instagram
right,
because she posts a lot of really cool quilt pictures on Instagram. You
right.
should check those out too. They genuinely didn't believe that it was real. They thought it was something generated by a machine. They didn't. I had to sit there and argue with them and show them videos of her doing it because they didn't believe that that was physically possible.
She gets a lot of that. She actually, her students in her class, here about 3 months ago or 4 months ago, there was one of her students was at her local guild, which is what quilters have. They have a quilters guild. And she was at the guild, and they were asking her, "Hey, am I able to get the program to do this on my computerized machine?" And she's like, "No, I learned how to do this from Susan Smith, and she's really good, and she taught me how to do it." And she said, "No,"
Mm-hmm.
she said, "that's machine generated." And they said, "No, this is a Susan Smith pattern." So it was
Yeah,
kind of cool to have that real world interaction from a student of Susan's. That was
yeah,
really cool.
it's wild. She does some amazing work.
So on all the social medias, just look for Stitched by Susan, all one word,
Mm-hmm.
and you will find her because she is the queen bee of quilting.
She
And you
really,
will,
really is. We're also supported by Northern Trust here in Fort St. John, British Columbia.
who may or may
Northern
not be
Trust
related.
may or may not be related. They are our local providers of truss systems, flooring systems, as well as various hardware and equipment that goes along with that. So if you're in the area and are in need of quotes or materials for truss systems, floor systems, uh, we also do a lot of referential work, I believe, for all the other various parts of framing a house. We may not have the stuff, but we can tell you where to get it. So that's Northern Trust in Fort St. John, British Columbia. I do not know the phone number.
250-787-3033.
787-3033. You need like a jingle for it.
And you, the one who would never sing when you were young.
I still don't.
You just did.
It's not singing, it's a jingle.
In, in front of our one viewer, who I'm pretty sure is Stitched by Susan. She's checking to make sure that her money was well spent.
Checking in on our investment. Anywho, before we get into the meat of today's show, I want to touch on we actually had a wonderful commenter on our last week's show.
So if you give me one moment, I'm going to go and grab
I've
it.
got it here. I've got it here. Are you going to put it on the screen?
I'm going to throw it on the screen so
Okay. I was going to read it out either
so
way.
more folks can read it. And if I remember right, he used to get a comment every now and again before as well, didn't he?
He did. He was under his old name of Jared Coop.
Yeah. Let me find. Oh, okay, Donnie, we need that smaller. We can fix that. Just let me.
Okay, there we go. I can read that.
Oh.
Oh, you're all over the place.
I am. Let's get this on there. Just give me a second. I can fix anything. We're going to put that on a white background.
While you're fiddling with that, I'll start reading it out. So it'll take a minute.
You start reading it out, yes.
So for those of you who weren't privy to last week's show, we were talking about a Satanist gathering and speech made during the International Day of Prayer, or no, American Day of Prayer. I don't know if it's international. But we made some comments. Specifically, I made some comments about the Satanist Church that were not factually correct, and I wanted to offer Chase's take on that here in the comments, where he wrote, "In the interest of clarifying a couple of things, Satanism is not in fact a joke religion. My wife and I are Satanists for the same reason that I would say most religious people follow their religion. These are our sincerely held beliefs that happen to be in a non-theistic religion. Neither the Satanic Temple nor us are against Christianity or any other religion, but we certainly do want all religions to be treated equally. No given preferential treatment in the public square or in politics ought to be given to any religion. We believe that logic, science, communication, and reason should determine humanity's path forward, not the rules taken from the sacred fables of any religion." That was very well put. So I want to retract my statement as to the Satanic Temple being a parody of Christianity, as it is obviously not. It is its own thing, its own beast, and I regret. What's the word I'm looking for? Denigrating their
The
organization with my
problem
comments.
that I have with that is if you believe in Satan as a religion or as the leader or whatever he is, it it is a theistic religion.
But they don't believe in Satan.
Oh,
They don't believe in any god. Satan is just the figurehead, poster child. It's more of a stylistic choice. And then that's where I drew my conclusion of it being a parody of Christianity. Was they were using the antithesis of the Christian God as their primary form of iconography. Um,
that
but no,
doesn't make sense though. If you call yourself a Satanist,
yeah,
is that you believe in the headship, if you will, or the deity of Satan, as you
no,
are a Satanist. It isn't a nothingness, or you would be an atheist.
they
But
can
you
call it
are
whatever they want
acknowledged.
to call it. The practice of their beliefs isn't to believe in a specific deity. And I would imagine that there's probably a likelihood that there are people within the Satanist temple that do believe in a deity, but they maintain that all forms of worship should be treated equally and not given preferential treatment by governments or politicians.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my understanding of
I don't like your understanding of it.
it. That may be, but I like
Because
to think that I have the right of it.
if you call yourself a Satanist,
Mhm.
you sort of are acknowledging that you believe in Satan.
Not necessarily. If you're calling yourself a Satan, that means you're part of the Satanic Temple. People can misconstrue
Okay.
that means you believe in Satan, but the
No,
Satanic Temple doesn't necessarily worship Satan.
that makes zero sense. Don't call yourself a Satanist if you don't believe in the lordship
But
or whatevership of Satan.
I think the biggest group that they end up pushing back against, especially in North America, would
Is
be
Christianity.
Christianity, so that
Right.
it would make sense then for them to use iconography that is the
Then
polar opposite of Christian
why would they
iconography,
just say we don't believe in any God?
because it wouldn't
Because
make headlines. It wouldn't make headlines. Nobody would give a crap.
so so if that's
It's
the case, I would say you are right. It is a parody of.
I mean, I guess, but I feel like that minimalizes what they're actually doing and what their core tenets are, because their tenets, I think, are actually genuinely well thought out
No,
and good. Yes.
no, because they call themselves Satanists. So their core tenets are hogwash because they are calling themselves
How are they
something.
hogwash?
Because they're calling themselves a Satanist and saying I don't believe in Satan.
Yeah. We went
Hello,
over the core tenets last week.
then that's a
Their core tenets
parody.
make perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm agreeing with you that I think on a technical level it might be a parody, but I feel like just calling it a parody is very um what's the word I'm looking, not derogatory, but
So
derivative. Derivative. It's incredibly derivative.
as a rule, I like Chase. He usually has some really good things to say. In this case, I'd love to have you comment again on this one, or maybe even in the comments live, or maybe we'll have you on the show because I would be really interested in. Oh, thanks, Jeremy. I don't think he has been. I don't think he is a Christian. But how can you say that I am a Satanist?
Yeah.
And then I'm non-theistic. That really, it doesn't compute. Really,
The Satanist bit it's just a title. It's just a name. It doesn't actually dictate worship. And I think on one hand it gets them headlines, but I worry that, as you're being living proof of, that it confuses people who might be looking at it from the outside.
Oh, you think?
And that's maybe a valid criticism of it, but I think that I think that just because they're called that doesn't automatically lump them in there. It might make that a difficult thing to explain from a PR perspective.
So we're going to get on with the show here. Although, speaking of,
You know what? I will talk to
go
Chase
ahead.
because I see him regularly. I will talk to him and see if he'd be interested in coming on the show, and we'll get
Yeah,
his perspective from it directly in a more
yeah, I
fleshed
would
out
be
manner.
interested in that because I've never had
I
a
will extend
conversation
that
with a
offer.
Satanist before. Had a conversation with a lot of people, not a Satanist. Um, Here's a question, not a question. This is a story of my week. Speaking of Satan and God and religion,
Okay.
I have a friend of mine who's a good Catholic. And when I say he's a good Catholic, he believes in the Catholic Bible, not in the Protestant Bible. And
Mhm.
the Catholic Bible has extra books.
Yeah.
They're I forget what they're called. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So he was at our church. I work at a church, and he was in. And so I introduced him to my pastor, and I said, "Hey, Josh," I said, "this is my friend." I said, "He's a Catholic." And I said, he's after me to read the real Bible. And my friend, the Catholic, said, "Yeah, I want him to read the whole book and not the Reader's Digest condensed version." And it was one of those things that, hey, you have to be old to know what a Reader's Digest condensed book is because
Hey,
you're old.
I make that joke in the Carol Burnett show, actually.
Oh, do you? That's
I
funny.
do. I do.
It's one of those, the Reader's Digest version. And I looked at him, I said, geez, we're old, because I actually knew what he meant. And yeah, so now I have to go in and learn what those other books are in the Catholic Bible so he doesn't mock me mercilessly. So we were talking about our topics for this week, William,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't sure. And sort of as a joke, I sent you a clip of Bill Maher,
Yeah.
who is one of my heroes. I think that he pokes holes at the left in a way that's hard for the left to argue a lot of times.
I'll sort of agree with that. We'll get into it in more detail, but
yeah.
Yes, he does poke some valid holes, but I take umbrage with a lot of the things that he says as well.
In this episode especially, and again, actually, so this evening, I sat down with your mother and said, "Hey, is it okay if we run this clip as it pushes a few of your buttons?" And I knew that.
Yeah.
And she said to go ahead, so I'm going to go ahead and run the clip, and we can discuss.
Is this a clip that I haven't seen?
No, this is the clip I sent you.
Okay, yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to push the buttons too hard, and then and then you wouldn't love me anymore, and it'd be the Dave show, not the Will and Dave show, and that'd be really boring. Nobody would listen.
The video did push my buttons. I couldn't make it through the video in one sitting. I had to take a breather.
It's like 9 minutes long.
Yeah, it ruffled my feathers though, and I don't want to be just sitting there fuming and miss the point because I'm angry. I want to come back with fresh eyes and ears. Okay, I do take his point seriously.
So we're going to go ahead and play the first 30 seconds. And for those of you who worry about us and copyright, yeah, we're probably going to get dinged on this one. And again, I'll argue
They'll steal the money that we're not making off of it.
That's right. Here we go.
Which means if we follow this trajectory, we will...
Nope, that's wrong. Here we go.
Doubling every generation.
Oh, no, this is right.
According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z. Which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054.
So
let's start with
that's actually, yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. So I actually found the poll that he referenced.
Okay.
By Gallup, as well as some other polls, because I was curious, because those numbers seemed exceptionally high. Because my understanding was the generally regarded average of members of the LGBT community relative to the population is somewhere between 2 to 6%, depending on what generation you're polling and how you're polling them. If you're polling them physically or over the phone, it's really low. If you're polling them online anonymously, it tends to be a lot higher. So I looked at the Gallup poll, and the Gallup poll, his numbers are technically not wrong, but they're twisted heavily. So the Gallup poll makes a lot of reference to the fact that those numbers are not existing within a vacuum. Things like when you look at Joe Biden's era that has like the 0.8%, those people almost exclusively either were polled back then, which is where some of the data is coming from, or in current polls, they don't respond to anonymous online polls the same way. Their rate of or how they interact with polls plays into how the data adds up. And
And your point is?
My point is that he's taking the numbers that are actually not that extreme. The numbers are on a gradual curve that relegates or that reflects the younger generations being more open about their sexuality and being more communicative with it. Yes, there is definitely a growth in the number of people who identify as part of the LGBTQ community. But it's not that, like, his last number there, where I'm going to pull the poll up in a second. It isn't that 20% of people identify as LGBTQ. It's 20% just of Gen Z identify as such. And so they're using the numbers in a way that is disingenuous, I think. Now, there is something to be said for the rate going up, but something that he's also not taking into account is things like, it's safe to say that you're gay now.
He talks
in
about
Joe
that.
Biden's era,
He talks
very,
about that.
very briefly.
Well, he's a comedian, so he's making a point. He's really open about the fact that obviously it's a good thing now that it's safe to say, I'm gay or I'm trans, etc. It's
and
a good thing.
Get to that. But the way he's twisting the numbers is to make it sound like it's a shite load of people that are all coming out very quickly. And the other thing we have
percentage,
but
this poll, as we know, the polls aren't perfect, and again, I'll cede that fact.
And here's the other thing, though. This is the biggest one: is that that is a poll, and that is the all-encompassing. That is everything that is included under the umbrella of the LGBTQ plus community. So that is everyone that isn't exclusively heterosexual.
Yeah.
And so, relatively speaking, that's still a pretty low number of people.
Oh.
Relative to the population, you're still looking at only 7.6%. 20% of Gen Z, you're looking at 7.6% of the total population identifies as part of the. So there's only 7.6% of the population that isn't exclusively heterosexual. That is still wildly majority heterosexual people.
Yeah, is that a problem?
No, it's not. I'm just saying that he's painting it as if it is a rampant problem. It's not. It's 7.6% of people identify as not straight. That is everything from mildly bisexual to trans, gay, queer, two-spirit. There's a massive umbrella of people.
His point is, let's go on in the next clip, because I think we'll cover his point in the next clip.
The next clip's going to make me angry, so let's do it.
It wasn't that long ago when adults asked a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? They meant what profession?
So I respect that lady for not slapping him.
Why?
Because I would.
Why?
It's because it's language like that insinuates that a person's sexual orientation is exclusively choice-based. That it's just a decision that they decided, not that it's part of who they are. Gender can be argued as purely a social thing that someone chooses and expresses as, but a person's sexuality is generally something that they are born with and grow into or discover about themselves, but has been there from the very beginning. That is almost universally accepted by the scientific and medical community. That sexuality is something you are born with, not something that you just decide.
Oh, we're going to go down this rabbit hole and we're going to regret it.
I just hate the fact that Bill Maher represents it as such. I think that is extremely unfair to the LGBTQ community.
Why?
Because it's not a choice.
It's not?
It's who they are. I mean, it could be a choice sometimes, but generally speaking, it's who they are. When did you choose to become straight, Dave? When did you sit down and be like, I feel like I'm going to be straight? Or is it just the way you are?
Straight is a gender.
No, it is not. Straight is a sexual preference. No, it is not. Cis is a gender.
Okay, hold on a second. If you say to me that it is a preference, then I have to choose that preference. My sex.
No, not necessarily.
If I'm male or female or non-binary, as apparently there is a fraction of society is non-binary.
Intersex, yes.
Male, female, or intersex or non-binary.
Non-binary is a gender, not a sex.
Okay,
they're different
the ones
things.
that are neither, whatever you call them.
Non-binary would be a gender thing, not a sex thing.
So those I can have a conversation about and say, you don't have a choice.
No.
Yes.
You got them backwards.
No.
Gender is things you have a choice. Yes, gender,
Yes.
non-binary.
That's what I mean. If I
Those
am
are
male
choices.
or female,
Oh, that is sex, not gender.
that's what I said. I thought. If I didn't, I apologize.
No,
Sex.
So yeah, you have male,
You don't
female,
have
and
a
intersex.
choice on.
Yeah, you don't have a choice as a general rule.
Right. But when you wake up, you say, "Do I want to be gay? Do I want to be straight? Do I want to be a whatever the other alphabets are?"
Yeah.
Is a choice.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. You just
No.
said it's a preference. It's a gender. It's a
No.
preference.
A preference doesn't mean it's a choice. Okay, a preference means it's what your preference is. I didn't wake up and decide that I like the taste of grapes. I just do. That's just who I am. I eat grapes. I like it, or I eat Marmite and I think it's disgusting. That's not a choice. That's just the way I am.
It's in the word that you used. Hit your sexual
If I had, okay, my sexual preference though, that is what I prefer. But I didn't sit down one day and decide this is what I like. That's just what I like. It just is. That's who I am. That is a part of me that is coded into me.
I'm going to tell a
I didn't
story,
have a choice in the matter.
and I'm going to use your brother, not you.
Okay.
He might get mad at me, except it isn't a bad story. He was, 8 or 9 years old, and he wanted a belt. Really bad, he wanted a belt. He wanted a Puma belt because it was a Puma brand. He wanted a Puma belt. It had to be a Puma belt, or I don't want a belt.
Mm-hmm.
If it isn't a Puma belt, then I don't want it. He had $19 in his jeans or something. I think it was like $11 for the Puma belt. And every other belt in the planet on Walmart was like $9.99. And I said, you want to spend the extra money on that? You're not going to have any extra money for candy, but you can choose to have the Puma belt because you like the Puma belt.
Yeah.
It lasted for maybe a year or two. He wanted all Puma. And all of a sudden he woke up one morning and said, hey, I don't like Puma anymore. I want Reebok or Nike or whatever the next thing that he liked was. Because it's a choice. He woke up and said, I like Puma. Hey, I like Nike. Hey, I like these things. Now, here's the thing is I don't mind you saying you like Puma. I don't care. If you wake up one morning and say, hey, now I like Nike. Hey, I like grapes. Now I don't like grapes. Hey, I went through COVID. I don't have any taste anymore. I don't like lasagna anymore. I don't care, but it still is a choice, and it is not science. And so as you grow and you change and you say, hey, maybe when I'm 8 years old, as we get into further in the show, maybe I don't have the capacity to make hard decisions on the things that I like because those things are a choice.
Okay. So you're conflating two different things. This is not an apples to apples comparison.
Why not?
The belt is something that you wear. It is an expression. That changes all the time for people. Okay. Gender expression, clothing, all of those things are forms of expression. That falls into that same category as gender. That changes all the time. You don't really have a biological disposition towards one thing or the other. There's a whole litany of factors that would change that are non-biological in nature.
Okay.
But a person's taste, a person's sexual preference, those are things that tend to be coded into them on a biological level. And even those can change. Like there are foods that I hated growing up that tasted bad to me. I did not want to eat them. And I'll use spirits as an example. I didn't like the taste of spirits or beer growing up, but I've grown older and they have grown on me. They're something that I enjoy now, but it's on a biological level. I didn't have any choice in whether or not I liked them. I didn't wake up and decide I do or don't like them one day. One day the taste was just good. My body was like, hey, this is the way, this is what we like now. I don't have a choice in that matter. I have no say in it. I have a say in whether or not I drink it, but I have no say in whether or not I enjoy it. It just is.
Okay, so we're going to go on with the clip because let's go on with the clip because I'm going to come back to this as he touches on it a little further in the show. I have to get the next just a second.
In the wake of America,
we're going to go to 2:54. Get a little bit earlier than that, actually.
Because we're literally experimenting on children. Maybe that's why Sweden and Finland have stopped giving puberty blockers to kids. because we just don't know much about the long-term effects. Although common sense should tell you that when you reverse the course of raging hormones, there's going to be problems. We do know it hinders the development of bone density, which is kind of important if you like having a skeleton. Fertility and the ability to have an orgasm seem also to be affected. This isn't just a lifestyle decision, it's medical.
So that was one of the clips you chose.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for a reason.
Again, this is coming from Bill Maher because I don't. Yeah. This is an avowed liberal who's looking at these ideas and these concepts and saying, "Wait a minute." Yeah. Now we had a conversation on the puberty blockers a while ago, early on in the show, and I took the same argument that he's having here.
So, but
when you're a kid, you don't know what you like and don't like, and you don't know if it will change. And when you do the things which are permanent, mm-hmm. it's probably a mistake.
So, as far as science knows, now I couldn't find any concrete reasoning as to why Sweden and what was the other one, Finland?
I think so, yeah.
They did largely inhibit the use of puberty blockers. They're not completely outlawed, but their use is much more limited.
Yes. And there are those of us who think that's a good thing.
That's whatever. Their concern is that we don't know the extra long-term effects because they've only been used since about 1993.
Right.
And originally their usage was for children who are experiencing excess hormones that their body isn't ready to handle. You know, children that are hitting puberty at the age of like 5 and 6 when their body really shouldn't be.
Right.
People that basically have hormonal, not deficiencies, but excesses. That was the original purpose. And they've been in use in circulation since 1993. Sorry. So I didn't find, outside of the Washington Post article that he referenced there, in my little bit of time researching, I couldn't find any other reference to difficulty with orgasming outside of that happens with a lot of hormonal treatments, whether it's antidepressants. That happens a lot. Right. It's not exclusive to puberty blockers. But the fertility and the bone density are both grossly taken out of context. Grossly. Yes, puberty blockers do affect your ability to be fertile.
Yes.
While they're in effect, because your body doesn't produce estrogen. You don't have periods. So no duh, it affects fertility. So far, we only have very limited research as to what happens to a trans person's body when they come off of things like testosterone that are inhibiting their body's ability to produce estrogen, produce eggs, and have babies. But what little data we have suggests that within 4 months, you can go back to having kids. There is no data that says that there's long-term effects that inhibit fertility. It inhibits fertility in the short term because it's literally built to do that. And the same goes for bone density. Yes, bone density is reduced because if you're not getting excess testosterone, your bones don't become more dense like the male structure tends to be. That feeds into the whole using hormone therapy when competing in sports, because if you're taking excess testosterone, your bones are denser. It's not that there is an excess or an extreme reduction in bone density, is that they don't get extra dense like they would normally for a boy. So he's taking them grossly out of context. Yes, it stops fertility, and yes, it reduces bone density because it's literally supposed to do that. That's not an accident. That's not a side effect. That is an effect. And so your claim that puberty blockers are potentially causing permanent damage, it's actually the other way around. As far as we know now, Sweden and Finland have concerns, that's valid. But as far as we know right now, as a child naturally reaches certain stages of puberty, it is harder to walk that back if they're already an adult than it is to put a hold on it until they are old enough to make the decision. Because puberty blockers are just putting a hold on. It is not backstepping. It's just stopping. Right? That's what they do.
I'm going to be fair. I have not read the science on this. I think that it is amazingly short-sighted of people to look at the word of an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old
So
who says, "Hey, I think I'm a woman," and say, "Why don't we put you on puberty blockers? Because that might
so
help you discover yourself."
that's not how that works.
It is exactly how that works.
No.
Yes.
They have to have consent from a doctor, which is not the easiest thing to get depending on what state or province you're in. They also have to have consent from a parent. Both parents
No,
usually,
they do not.
They do in most states because most doctors they don't legally have to have it, but most doctors will not do the procedure without it. I was looking up stats.
Yes.
Most doctors will not do it before the age of 10 to 11 because they won't do it before you hit puberty. If you haven't hit puberty, you don't need
Thank
puberty
God
blockers
for those
because they won't do
doctors.
anything. Yeah. Just because they are able to, that usually exists in the case of kids who don't have parents to make those decisions. But generally speaking, a doctor, as a rule, will not prescribe them until they have parental consent or guardian's consent. And as a general rule, it is only used as a stopgap until the child is old enough to make that decision for themselves, depending on the state or province. It could be 16 to 18 years old. It is not so widespread or so pandemic-y a thing. Now, this is the thing I really wanted to hit on, is like everything that Bill Maher is saying here,
Yes.
and we don't want to use too many clips of his, so it's kind of between the lines. But a lot of what he's saying is that it's becoming a fad
He does
to
say
be
that,
part of the
actually. He
LGBT.
does say that.
Do we
It's
have
cool.
do we have a clip with that in it? I thought we didn't have a clip with that.
I don't have a clip with that in it.
But yeah, he
But it is
does
in the
say
clip.
that.
And there's a link
I'm
to the full clip in the show notes.
Yeah,
So
highly recommend you watch it.
yes.
And that, I think, is actually a valid criticism. It's a very valid criticism, especially when he references the fact that people who disagree, like people who look at Finland and Sweden for holding back, I fully agree that it is a valid concern to say, hey, we don't know, past the 19 years that we've been using them, past those 19 years, we don't know the long-term effects. Now, do I agree with that? Probably not. But if they as a country want to do that, that's okay. But what I want to point out is that Bill Maher is using crap evidence to back up that claim. He's using crap.
So he is a comedian. So I mean, I'll give you the fact that he's picking and choosing his data. I'll agree with that. We're gonna roll on to your next clip here, and then we'll come back to some of these.
Okay.
An EpiPen and a GPS tracker.
Oh no, I gotta move that back a little bit. I'm sorry.
And fodder. I don't understand parents who won't let their 9-year-old walk to the corner without a helmet, an EpiPen, and a GPS tracker. And God forbid their lips touch dairy. But hormone blockers and genital surgery, fine. Talk.
This is, again, I don't think he's just using bad evidence. He's outright lying.
No, he's not.
I tried to find evidence of genital surgery outside of children who are born intersex. So they are born with more than one set or an incomplete set of genitals. And so they have surgery to correct that. Most places it is illegal. And almost universally, doctors will not give physical genital surgery, like bottom surgery, to minors. You have to be 18 or older. You have to be a consenting adult to do it. They don't do it. So him saying that is an outright lie. It's bullshit. This is my problem with it. Like everything, like his thing there where he's talking about parents not letting their kids go out and do the most simple of things for fear of the effects and the ramifications of such, like going to the store, but they'll let their kids mess around with their hormones, or their kids decide to mess around with their hormones. That is a valid concern. To say that we're helicopter parenting on certain areas of our kids' lives, but not others, that is a valid point. That is a valid thing to look at that hypocrisy and question it. Absolutely. But then he goes and shovels crap over it like that. That's the part that I hate. I think he can make a good point without lying and twisting numbers to try and favor his point. He should be able to make the point without that. I think that it's incredibly disingenuous of him and or his writing staff to go that route. You don't need to lie to make a good point.
I don't think he's lying because I think it has happened. I don't have the evidence, but I will have it soon.
If it is fringe. It is a fringe
so it might
case.
be fringe, but it also is. He's using extreme examples, as we often do, to make a point.
We both know how much I love that.
I realize that.
For both sides. That is not exclusive to me disliking the writer or the right making points like that. I dislike the left doing it too.
So we're going to play the final clip. Those are the ones that you picked. I picked the final clip. So we're going to go to that one, and then we'll
Talk about a nut
hold on.
allergy.
Let me wrap this up. Talk about a nut allergy. I love that line.
I wanted to be a pirate. Thank God nobody took me seriously and scheduled me for eye removal and peg leg surgery.
It is.
Eye removal and peg leg surgery are permanent procedures. Hormone blockers, as far as we know, are not.
Are we willing to gamble with that?
Are we? We're willing to gamble with eating dairy and red meat in record amounts.
No, because that has been done for centuries.
And
we know you
people
don't
die
die
from.
of it.
I'd argue, but yeah.
Don't yell in the
okay.
mic, but yeah.
Sorry.
It is a.
Clip that noise.
Clip that noise, yeah.
Make it like a little button.
It's hard for me, William, to hear you defend the choice of youth, knowing how fickle they are. And that is really hard. As a parent, it's hard to hear. As what you get is you get these 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 16-year-olds who are fairly sure they know what they want to be, who have not made up their mind before they hit their 20s often.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at them and we say, ooh, you want to be gay, you want to be trans? I really don't care. I mean, I do, but I don't. But for God's sake, lay off the medication and the surgeries until they actually know. And they don't know it until they're older.
I don't think it matters any more than any other lifestyle choice, whether it be taking up smoking or drinking or driving fast vehicles.
Okay.
I think it's no different. There's ramifications that come with all of those decisions.
And they're all wrong.
I mean, are they though?
Except for fast vehicles. I like that.
Fast vehicles are dangerous. They are infinitely more dangerous on like a relative scale than taking a hormone blocker. A hormone blocker
that is
might
a manageable risk.
But
it's a manageable risk.
Putting youth on ATVs hardly qualifies as a manageable risk any more than a medical procedure would be.
No, because you can educate a youth about an ATV.
Ah.
And you can say, here's what you do in order to make it safe. You can't educate them about hormone blockers or
yes, you can.
Or genital surgery. No, you cannot.
Why not?
Because you don't have the data to support it, Will. And
we've got quite a bit of data to support everything.
Well,
up to a point, up to that 19-year point, we have lots of data to extrapolate.
You cannot educate them and say, here's what happens if you do XYZ, it will mitigate the risk. You can't do that. It's a pill. What? You take it. With an ATV.
You tell them, hey, if this is what you really want, there are potential side effects. There are potential ramifications for taking this route.
But we know it is a fact that youth do not know what they want the vast majority of the time. We know that.
As far as we know, there are no permanent ramifications for this. To the best of our current knowledge, there are no extreme ramifications any more than letting a kid drive a fast vehicle. How there's potential extreme ramifications from that in fringe cases where they drive recklessly. As far as we know, there are no extreme ramifications for it. Why wouldn't we let them try? Why wouldn't we? Like, I don't understand why we feel the need to police what someone can do with their body, whether they're young or not. Maybe they will not like it. Maybe they'll do it and they'll decide this really is not what or who I want to be, so I'm not going to do it. So they stop.
William, If you get on
David?
an ATV and you want to drive it and you're 11 years old,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually against the law, I believe, in most countries.
Yeah, let's
Let's
not
say
talk about all the
16.
times I
Let's say
did it.
16.
Yeah.
That way we're legal. When you're 16 years old, I can show you how to use them safely.
Mm-hmm.
You lean into the curve. You keep it under a certain speed limit. If it's a hillside, your nose is bouncing, you don't go up that hillside. All the things that I can show you and say, here's how you reduce the risk of using this machine. You cannot do that for pure. Yeah,
Yes, you can.
No, you can't. Here's all you
Why,
can
how
do.
not?
Here's all you can do. You can say, here are the risks.
Yeah,
Either
that's all
accept
you
them or
can
not.
do for the ATV. You can
No.
tell me all the different things to
Yes.
do. How many times did we roll a quad as kids? How many times did
Often.
we almost die on that quad? So it doesn't matter how many times you tell
William.
us. We can still mess it up.
Yes, I'm not saying you can't mess it up, except you can reduce the risk through how you use it. You cannot reduce the risk of puberty blockers by how you use it.
The
You
risk
can't reduce
is
the risk.
the risk of puberty blockers, though, is completely theoretical at this point. It's theoretical. The best you can say is that we don't know beyond 19 years. That is the most dangerous thing you can say is we don't know beyond 19 years.
William,
all that risk is theoretical. The
all
risk
I'm
of other
saying
things
is that you
is
can't
absolute.
reduce the risk.
Yeah, but it's risk that may not even be there. I feel like we are like I don't understand why we are so bent on avoiding this theoretical maybe there's a risk there when we let kids and adults do all manner of stupid crap with blessing. Like
How many
times were we as kids allowed to do things that you or mom knew were probably not going to end well because you thought it's probably better if they do it, it bites them in the butt, and they learn not to do it again?
Often.
Why?
Because you learn from it.
So why can't we let kids learn how they want to handle their own bodies?
Because they don't know, and because we don't know what the risks are.
We know better than most things we let kids do. From like the risks that we know of so far for puberty blockers are less than the risks of putting your kid in an organized team sport. As far as we know. And we know reasonably, 19 years is a pretty long testing period for most forms of medication. Seriously.
So were I to concede that fact, which I'm not sure I'm willing to, but I might.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not going to cede that fact. I'm just reading the effects of the Mayo Clinic and their list of effects, which is a fairly and it is not. It's not the same as the risk of an ATV, as you can't reduce the risk. It's either do it or don't do it.
Yeah.
It is an acknowledging of the risk is you can mitigate the risk, you can do this, and the risk will be less. It's not that at all.
This is more of if the risk is even there.
Well, no, the risk is there, and we know the risks are there.
We don't know that.
It's an argument of how much of a risk, perhaps, but you cannot mitigate the risk. You cannot mitigate the risk except to not do it.
It's a theoretical risk.
No,
like
it's not.
I've literally just debunked all of those side effects.
You have
as being risks. How have I not?
Because they are risks, and you can't mitigate them.
The bone density isn't a risk. The fertility, as far as we know, isn't a risk. It is an intended side effect. And not like a negative side effect, like you got a rash. No, it is an intended effect from taking puberty blockers.
Yes.
And like the fact that fertility is even coming into that equation when we're dealing with kids is kind of bonkers.
Except it's a risk that you cannot undo.
Yes, you can. You just stop taking them.
That's not what it says at the Mayo Clinic, which may not be the final source.
There are no, so I'm reading from the PHSA. There are no known reversible effects or irreversible effects of puberty blockers. If you decide to stop taking them, your body will go through puberty just the way it would have if you had not taken puberty blockers at all. The effects of puberty blockers will stop or limit growth of facial hair, deepening of voice, broadening of shoulders, growth of gonads. If you're assigned female, puberty blockers may stop or inhibit breast tissue development, broadening of hips, monthly bleeding. In most cases, they will temporarily stop or limit growth, development of sex drive, impulsive, rebellious, irritable, or risk-taking behavior, accumulation of calcium in the bones, and fertility. Those are intended effects. And they all go back to the way they're quote unquote supposed to be as soon as you, or not as soon as, a period after you stop taking them. Obviously, your body has to readjust.
So let's assume
Okay.
you're 8 years old. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to pick a young number.
That's
as it is
extremely
legal.
young. But most doctors wouldn't go through with it. The majority.
Okay,
of
let's say
doctors.
11 years old.
Okay, perfect. There you go. It's a good age.
11-year-old. You wake up one morning and you say, you know what? I'm a guy, but I think I might actually be a woman, so I want to go on puberty blockers.
Yeah.
And you do that for 6 years.
Okay.
Okay, you do it for 6 years. You say, you know what? I don't know what I want, so I'm going to go on puberty blockers. I'm going to do it, and you do it for 6 years. And then you wake up one morning and you realize, hey, no, I think I really am a guy.
Okay.
I'm going to go off. You think that there is no risk from you artificially halting your hormonal clock for 6 years.
So you're doing an extreme disservice to people who experience gender dysmorphia with statements like waking up one day and decide. Again, doctors don't support kids doing that. Like, obviously some doctors will just allow
From 8 to 11,
kids.
he's been talking about it.
Okay.
From 8 to 11, he's talking about it.
So he's got years of build up to this.
So at 11, he says, I want to do it. They say, okay, he does it until he's 17. I'm giving you time to do this and to see, as apparently this is a thing. He wakes up one morning at 17, and maybe he started when he was 14, but but he woke up one morning and said, I don't want to do it anymore.
Okay.
So he has 6 years, which he held off his hormonal clock.
As far as my research can find, there is no special mention that regardless of how long a person is on puberty blockers, that their body will not course correct as soon as they're off the puberty blockers.
Well, no, because in what you read, his balls haven't dropped yet.
Yeah? They will after his body starts pumping out testosterone again. His body's going to go do that.
It's not going to happen overnight.
No. It may not take 6 years because the rest of his body, many parts of his body have continued to grow. It's just catching up in certain areas. Like if that was a major concern, I have to assume that somewhere when I'm Googling side effects of puberty blockers, I'm going to find evidence of this. We've been doing it for 19 years and I found nothing, nada, zip zilch, none. The only things I found were the arguments for the bone density and the fertility, both of which can be easily debunked isn't even the right word. They're not even valid claims to begin with. Well, they're misconstruing of facts.
There are some of those of us who think they are valid claims. It's in the New York Times. I'm reading that. It obviously is at the Mayo Clinic who says it's a problem. It's a risk.
That it is a risk, but only if you think that having bones like a woman is risky.
Yes.
Or not being able to have children until you're off puberty blockers is risky. Because when people either go off puberty blockers, and we also know that if you go off of straight up like adults that have transitioned, that are on testosterone to become for trans men, if they stop taking it, their body will revert back to having a female reproductive system, a functioning one, within 4 months. Not
Here's
like just limited data, but it's there.
That I'm going to let my liberal side out a little bit here. If you're of the age of consent, I don't really care. If you want to take a hacksaw and go all Lorena Bobbitt on yourself, I don't have a problem with that. Where I believe I have a problem, and obviously Mr. Bill Maher has a problem, is when you take that and you say to kids who don't know, who we know do not know until they're in their 20s, for sure boys and even girls, and say, hey, we're going to let you do it.
In a controlled environment.
He makes the line in there, or says a line which I liked. If we allowed our decisions all to be made by preteens or by children, we'd all be princesses and pirates or whatever his other example was.
But I feel like there's a certain amount of decision making that should be given to children and how they deal with their own bodies. Somehow people seem to rationalize the idea that like letting kids drive ATVs or trucks on the farm or freaking tractors, they're capable of making decisions there. But when it comes to making decisions about their own body, obviously they're fucking invalids and not capable of doing that.
We don't let them just make the decision of driving a tractor. We show them how to drive the tractor, and we help them learn how to drive the tractor.
So how like I'm
yeah
like I'm assuming here we're dealing with a competent parent or parents who are going to help a kid understand the ramifications of the decision they're making, help walk them through it, maybe even talk to a psychiatrist or a counselor about this. Obviously talking to a doctor about it because you need the doctor to prescribe the things. We're just assuming that kids are just idiots. No. And that the parents that are working with them are idiots and willfully allowing the kids to be idiots. I think that is the minority.
I believe what the majority of us on the right think, and I say believe because but I don't want to speak for all of them, is that we don't allow earth-shattering decisions, i.e. hormonal blockers, i.e. operations for transgender youth.
They don't allow operations for transgender youth as a rule outside of medical emergencies. It is almost impossible to get one.
As soon as you use the phrase as a rule, I get all squirrely about it, but hey, I'll let you have that one.
Every website that I looked up said doctors do not allow or prescribe surgery until 16 to 18, depending on legal age of consent in the States. Generally speaking, they have to wait until legal age of consent.
Okay, so at 16, I know my kids.
Take that up with the state that decided that the age of consent is 16.
Even
obviously, they think that kids are allowed to decide if they want to bang or not at that age, so we can decide what they want to do with their own bodies. If they get to decide what they're going to do with other people's bodies.
And I would disagree with that. We don't even allow them to buy cigarettes until they're 21.
That's a more valid consideration, and I'd be down with that, with holding off on surgery, because surgery is not so easily reversible. But blockers are. As far as we know, blockers are incredibly easily reversible, and that you just stop taking them.
I'm just glad I got you to admit that last sentence, and it's recorded for all time on YouTube.
Yeah,
that you're.
I don't think that's a new thing for me to
say
that surgery being held off until age of consent, which I generally hold that the age of consent should be 18 in most cases, because generally speaking, we don't think of people as humans as being fully developed until around that area, depending on the person. But when you're making a blanket,
for males, it should be 35 for men.
You're not wrong, but so there's a certain amount of logic to that. But when it comes to blockers, I don't understand why we're so scared of a theoretical side effect when we let kids drive vehicles, shoot guns, and fuck.
Oh, there you had to go, Reg. The perfect.
I already dropped a couple of swear words throughout that. That wasn't the first one, so I figured I've already crapped the bed on that one, so I might as well go full bore.
Well, William, It's been an interesting show. We haven't solved anything except
We have
I
not.
think you ended on one line that we can agree on, and I think we should end at that one.
Which is that?
Well, the one that you're sort of okay with waiting until the age of consent for surgery. So
For actual bottom surgery, sure. Yeah.
any
I think
kind of
that's I think
surgery.
it's a valid. Yeah.
You want to add a pair of boobs onto a guy, you need to wait till
mean,
he's old enough to know what that means.
Adding or subtracting boobs is a relatively simplistic procedure that is easily reversible. It's just money. The genitals is a whole other ball of wax, though, because then you're dealing with reproductive organs, whereas the mammaries are not so complex. I mean, it's still complex as the body, but I mean, you're putting fat inside of the chest effectively. Or getting implants, however you want to look at it, or the removal of fat in the area.
Fat.
So I think that's that one. I'm kind of, I don't really care if that makes sense. Like, I would just assume lump it in with surgery in general, but it's not so bad. So I'm like, there's wiggle room. I'm not going to get bent out of shape if someone thinks that top surgery should be totally okay for minors. I'm going to be like, whatever. I don't think that's a whole lot worse than, say, tattoos or piercings on a minor.
And I would agree that those aren't really good for a minor either.
They do them all the time, despite parents' best efforts sometimes.
Tattoo age limit, Canada.
Not sure about Canada. I think it's 16.
18.
There you go.
How about USA?
It's probably based on the state.
Yeah.
I know that it's lowering, or used to be lower in California, because I remember going to gleanings as a kid and some of the kids sneaking away at Pismo Beach to go get tattoos and piercings.
Yeah, so when nationally it's 18. Yeah, nationally it's 18. There's a few exceptions.
I have to wonder if that's one of those areas where I don't want to denigrate tattoo artists, but I have to wonder how many tattoo artists give a crap about how old the person they're tattooing is. That they pay the money, they slap them with a tattoo.
I agree.
I feel like that's one of those businesses where they're not super concerned with it. No offense to tattoo artists. Maybe I'm full of crap with that statement. I'm not sure. I'm spitballing.
We've been more than an hour, so we should hang this up.
We should. I got a little bit heated in my very small, very warm office.
Yes. Is it warming up there? It was.
Yeah. It was above 20 Fahrenheit here.
So when is your long weekend in May?
It's this weekend.
This weekend?
Tomorrow is my stat. I'm recovering from.
And it didn't snow there on the May long weekend?
Yet.
I
will not count those chickens before they hatch. Yeah, not until the fat lady sings.
Because I can't remember how long it's been when it hasn't snowed on May long weekend.
Everyone here assumes that it's going to. You plan for it.
You
plan
do plan
for snow on May long.
Every year.
Mm-hmm. You mock the campers that don't.
Okay. Well, I am going to hit this here thing. Do you have anything you want to say to our fine viewers before we finish, William?
I do. Stay safe, don't die, and have yourselves a lovely night.